everyone. Welcome back to another Microsoft Ignite Learning Zone session. Today, I am very excited because my good friend Shanna is here to give us a demo of 3 different programming languages, C#, Python, and JavaScript, and show you how to make Hello World in each of them. So without further ado, Shanna, thank you so much for presenting today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks very much. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind everybody about the code of conduct for Ignite. It should be in the chat for all of you to take a look at. But basically, the idea is just to be kind and respectful to everyone, including each other, during the entirety of this event. Okay, again, thanks for the intro, Sarah. Like she said, my name is Shanna Matthews. I'm a program manager here at Microsoft. I focus on students and cloud computing. Today's talk, Hello World in 3 languages, is going to be a brief compare and contrast between some of the super popular programming languages that I think are best for beginners. We're going to be talking about Python, C#, and JavaScript today. I'm going to do my best to make sure not to use any jargon, not use too many acronyms, but if I slip up and if I say anything that you don't know what it means, please go ahead and ask a question in the chat. Sarah will be on there answering everyone's questions, and she would be happy to help you out with a quick explainer. Okay, when I was coming up with this talk, I really wanted to think about what are the things that I wish someone told me when I was first learning how to code, when I was first playing around with my first programming languages. To answer some of those questions, we're going to be using the Hello World program as an example. But before we go and dive in and do some of that, I thought I'd give some context, some history about what the Hello World program is and why we use it. I know I was confused when I first started programming, and this Hello World thing was everywhere and I'd never heard of it before. So I thought I'd share just a little bit with you about where it actually came from in the first place. The high-level view of why we use the Hello World program is because it's super simple. It's doing some of the simplest stuff we can do with a programming language, is just getting our feet under us, making sure we can run everything. What you're seeing on this slide right now is actually the Hello World program in the programming language C, which is not one of the languages we'll be talking about today. I don't think it is the most beginner friendly, but it's actually super relevant for the history of the Hello World program. So, the Hello World program is widely credited to the guy you're going to see in this picture. His name is Brian Kernighan. He's famous for writing a book called The C Programming Language, along with his co-author, Dennis Ritchie. C is a really old but still popular programming language. C#, which we will be talking about a little bit today, and C++ are both successors of C. They both came from C. So Brian's book, before he wrote this book, The C Programming Language, which was super famous, he wrote a less famous book about a less famous programming language that came before it, which was called B. That book was called A Tutorial Introduction to the Programming Language B, and it was in that book about B that the first ever example of the Hello World program was found. Brian Kernighan maybe was a little bit lazy. I know I can be sometimes. So after he used that example in his book about B, he decided to use it again in this book about C, which is the one that got super famous. So that example stuck, and people have been using it ever since. Okay, so today, like I said, we're going to be comparing, contrasting some things about some super popular programming languages, Python, C#, and JavaScript. If we have enough time, I might also throw in a bonus programming language. We'll see. For each of these programming languages, we're going to be talking about 3 main things. We're going to cover 3 things pretty quickly. We're going to talk about syntax. And when I say syntax, I'm talking about the things you actually type with your fingers on your keyboard, the things you put on the screen to write the language. We're going to be talking about why you might want to learn this language. So what are some things that it's used for? And third, we're going to be talking about stereotypes about the language. So we're going to talk about what makes this language unique, or what would be an interesting thing to know about this language before you get started with it. Okay, that all being said, since the best way to understand a programming language is just to play around with it, we're going to be doing that for the rest of the session in VS Code. So I'm going to pull that up. And let me say, while I 100% recommend VS Code as a good editor for beginners, the things you might see on my screen in my VS Code setup are not necessarily what a normal developer would have in their setup. The reason for that is just to make it as simple as possible to get all these programming languages into one environment together, but really don't take any inspiration for the stuff you're going to see about my developer environment. Cool. So first up is Python. You're seeing the Hello World Python program on the screen right now. Python really is one of my favorite programming languages, and one of the reasons I think it is great for beginners is because it really focuses on readability. And by that, I mean the syntax, what you see here, is really simple. So our Hello World program here, as you can see, is just 2 lines. What we're doing is defining a variable, message, and then we're printing that variable with the built-in print function that Python has. Let's quickly run it. So we're able to simply run that by typing Python and then the file name, helloworld.py. Okay, so I said the syntax of Python is really simple. It is. It's pretty nice to look at compared to a lot of languages, but one big thing about Python that's pretty unique is that whitespace matters in Python, and that's rare and kind of hard to get used to if Python is not your first programming language. When I talk about whitespace, I am referring to, for the most part, tabs, which you can see here with a little arrow, and spaces. These guys you can see with little dots. Usually you wouldn't be able to see them at all, but I've set up my environment so you can for a little bit of help today. Okay, so I'm going to add one other variable just to show you some stuff. Okay, Ignite. We're going to check if it's Ignite, and if it is, we're going to print hello Ignite instead. So let's run that. Awesome. Hello Ignite. You can see here how Python uses whitespaces. So unlike most programming languages, when we have our little code block under our if statement here, we check if is Ignite, we change the what we have in our message variable, and we're showing Python what we want to be part of that if statement by putting it into an indented block like this. If you are a developer or getting into the developer culture, you might hear a lot of developers fight about what's better, tabs or spaces. I'm really here to say, I agree with Python on this one. Python does not care if you use tabs or you use spaces, as long as you are consistent. So I have just changed us to using spaces right here. And let me add another variable where we have tabs, and I'll show you what happens. So we're not going to do anything with this variable. I just want to show you. There you go. So we have used 4 spaces here and 1 tab here. Some people think of those as kind of equivalent because they're taking up the same amount of space on my screen, but Python does not agree with that at all, and it's going to give us an error. Another thing that goes along with using whitespace to define what part of the program is what is the fact that in Python, we don't use things like semicolons or curly braces. So semicolons are what lots of programming languages use to end a line like this. Those are not required and not recommended in Python. And curly braces, which look like these guys, are frequently used to split up your code. They would frequently be used to decide what goes in this if statement, but we're not going to use those in Python either. Cool. All right, that was some syntax stuff. Let's talk about why we might use Python. Python is great for a lot of use cases. It's great for prototyping. It's great for scientific programming. It's used very commonly in web programming, but Python is really having a heyday because of the kind of data science and AI explosion that's been happening over the last few years. So if you think you might be interested in data science or AI, you're trying to figure out what programming language to use first, Python would probably be a pretty good choice. All right. Lastly, let's talk about stereotypes of Python. A big stereotype about Python is that it is slow. That is true. Python can be slower than other programming languages. One reason for that is because of the way it does typing. And when I say typing here, I'm not talking about the typing I'm doing on my keyboard, like clickety-clack that you'll hear in the background. The thing I'm talking about is variable types. So when we define our variables here, message or isignite, we can see that Visual Studio Code is doing something nice for us. It's telling us what the type of the variable is. So you can see we're getting a little message for our message variable. We see message str. Str stands for string, which means normal text like this. And isignite is showing bool, which is short for Boolean, which just means a value that has to be true or it has to be false. Python does something that is pretty friendly for developers in that it is loosely typed. So if we want to change the type of our variable, we don't have to do anything special. We could assign message to a Boolean value, or like we're doing right here, we could assign message to an integer value or a number value. Python's totally fine with that. We can run that. Now we can see that we've assigned message to be 3 if isignite is true, which it is. Print that out and we're getting a 3. Python's happy. So this loose typing is one of the things that might make Python slower than other languages. But if you really like Python, there are ways to mitigate the slowness and make it really fast like other programming languages too. So don't let that slowness stereotype stop you. Okay, let's move on to C#. Clear my screen, move on to the next file. Okay, I really like C#. I've used this language quite a bit. It's actually similar to another language called Java, which, fun fact, has no relation to the language JavaScript. If you're curious about that, feel free to drop a question in the chat. I'd be happy to talk more about how that came about. But one of the stereotypes, which I'll start with about C# is that it is verbose. And just based on what you can see on the screen, you can see that that's kind of true. What you're seeing on the screen is a lot of what's called boilerplate code. Boilerplate code pretty much refers to code that is very similar in many files. It helps give the code structure. It's kind of telling you exactly what's happening, while languages like Python and JavaScript to some extent keep that stuff more behind the scenes. Really though, in all of this code, there are 2 lines, lines 9 and 10 right here, that are kind of functionally equivalent to what we saw in the Python file. So that's where you can kind of directly compare and contrast. Let me just go ahead and run this too. You can see one other difference right away is that instead of typing like C# and then the file name, like we did Python file name with our Python, we're typing .NET run. What's happening behind the scenes here is kind of different than what we did with Python. It seems really similar because we're still just running something on command line. We're still just seeing something printed out. But technically what Python was doing was something called interpreting your code. And what we're doing here with C# is compiling the code. Again, we're not going to dive too deeply into that, but if you're curious, feel free to drop a question in the chat. Be happy to cover it during the Q&A session at the end, or do some research on your own. I think it's really interesting. Okay, let's talk about syntax here. So you can already see, or you can already probably guess, based on all the curly braces and semicolons that's going on here, C# does not care about white space. You're going to need curly braces, you're going to need semicolons. If I do something like get rid of my semicolon, you can already see a little squiggly red line here, and if I tried to run it, I would get the same error we're seeing here, a semicolon expected. But that it means that it's not white space dependent, so we can do all kinds of funky stuff here with our white space. It's going to run just fine. Of course, I really don't recommend formatting your code this way. It's hard to look at. It's kind of ugly, so we're going to undo that. But C# is totally fine with it. White space does not matter. Another thing you'll notice that's different, related to typing actually, is that we're declaring what type our variable is right here when we're first instantiating, creating the variable. So again, just like with Python, we have a string that is our message variable, but we actually want to tell C# that this is a string. We're doing so right here. So like I was saying, this is related to typing. C# is actually a strictly typed or a strongly typed programming language, where I said with Python it's loosely typed. So for example, if we wanted to try what we did with Python and set this to 3 or an integer, C# is actually going to tell us, wait a second, hold on, what are you trying to do? C# is trying to protect us here. It's actually trying to prevent you as a programmer from making mistakes. So C# is telling us, cannot implicitly convert type int to type string. So it's saying, hey, you told me message is a string. Message is definitely supposed to be a string, right? You're trying to give something to message that is not a string. What do you want to do about that? So there's stuff you can do if you did want to change message to a string, or you did want to fix that error. There's a way to fix that error. But C# is really doing this to kind of help you out. It does kind of make programming slower sometimes, though. Okay, so we talked about stereotypes, we talked about syntax. Let's lastly cover why we would want to use C#. One thing you probably noticed is that I typed .NET Run. If you're not familiar, .NET is actually a whole family of programming languages that work well if you're trying to write code for the Windows operating system, and they work quite well together. Trying to use C# with another language in the .NET family is going to be a lot easier than trying to use, for example, Python and JavaScript together. They just fit more nicely together because they were designed to do so. C# is also really popular for cloud programming. It works well with Azure. It's also probably, I guess, a little bit less known of a fact. It's great for game programming, AR and VR. Unity uses C#, and the Mono game engine actually does too. Okay, let's move on to our third language, JavaScript. Clear out that screen again. Okay. Last but not least, JavaScript. I think I've kind of said that I really like the other two programming languages we've covered. I like Python, I like C#. They're pretty different, but I really enjoy using both of those languages. I will say here that other people really, really love JavaScript. It's not my favorite. But that being said, JavaScript has its benefits for sure. Let's talk about why we would use JavaScript to kind of go over that. JavaScript, you might know, is the language of the web. That's just undeniable. If you're doing stuff with the web, you almost have to know JavaScript just as a prerequisite. It's a really employable language. I think according to the last few Stack Overflow surveys of developers, JavaScript is always at the top of what is the most popular language for developers. So if you want to do anything with the web, you want to get a job writing code, JavaScript is usually a good choice to help you do that. Okay, back to the code. If you're taking a look at this, you might actually think that the syntax of JavaScript here is probably similar to Python because it looks kind of the same. We've got 2 lines again. We don't have all that boilerplate going on. But in a lot of ways, the syntax of JavaScript is actually more similar to C#. It's not whitespace dependent, so you can do all kinds of funky whitespace again. And you do have to use curly braces and that kind of stuff. Let's also just quickly run this before I get too much further. Okay, cool. So we ran our code. It is working. Let's show you a little bit about that whitespace. So let's just do what we were doing again. Equals true. So you can see here, I'm using my curly braces. Hello, Ignite. All right, let's run that too. Awesome, we got it working. So you can do whatever kind of funky whitespace stuff you want here again as well. It's not going to have any issues. And one thing you might notice too is that semicolons, this is kind of a quirk of JavaScript. Semicolons, while not required in JavaScript like they are in C#, they're highly recommended. So I kind of accidentally on purpose left out a semicolon here to show you folks that we're not going to run into any issues when trying to run this code if we don't put that semicolon in. But it's certainly a best practice to put those semicolons in whenever you are writing JavaScript code. Okay, so we've talked about why we'd use it. We've talked about syntax. Let's do a final finisher here and talk about JavaScript stereotypes. We kind of saw how semicolons are optional, kind of a quirk of JavaScript. And the stereotype I'm going to tell you about JavaScript is that it is a quirky language. I really think this is completely true, and I will show you another example that baffles many beginner programmers. I'm going to just write a little bit of code, and then I will explain what's going on. Okay, we're going to change this. We're just going to move this guy in here. Okay. Talk about what little code changes I made here. So we already had our message variable, which was a string and had hello world in it. I created a new variable, message2, and it looks to also be a string based on the fact that we have new string here. And then I'm asking if those two variables are the same. Before I run this code, I want you to think quickly to yourself, what do you think it's going to do? So if those two variables are the same, what this, according to message equals message2, what this should do is print same into our console. And if they're not the same, this should not print anything, so we wouldn't see anything show up in our console after I ran it. So think to yourself, give yourself a hypothesis. What is this going to do? And I'll run it. Okay, so we ran this and we got it to print same. I'm curious what you thought, if that met your expectations or not. Okay, now we're going to make a small change. We're adding a third equal sign, which is pretty unusual for most programming languages to ever use 3 equal signs to do anything. But I'm going to run it again. Before I run it, what do you think it's going to do? Okay, so I run it this time and we don't print anything out, which means that with 3 equal signs, we don't think these two are the same. So what you're seeing here also relates to types. I'm talking about types a lot today, but JavaScript, like Python, is a loosely typed language. And what we're seeing here is a quirky behavior of JavaScript called type coercion. And what that means is when we have 2 equal signs, just like this, JavaScript looks at these two variables, message and message2, and tries to make them the same type of variable before it checks if they're the same. So if JavaScript does that and try to make these two variables the same type, we see that they are the same. So for your information, this first variable called message is a string literal type of variable, and message2 is a string object, which in JavaScript, those are different and treated a little bit differently. Again, drop it in the chat if you want to know more. So they're actually different object types. And we have 2 equal signs. We try to make them the same object type first and then compare. But we turn off that type coercion when we have 3 equal signs. And JavaScript just looks at those 2 variables and it says, those aren't even the same type of variable. I'm done. They're not the same. Don't need to do anything else here. So that's kind of why we're seeing different behavior with 2 and 3 equal signs. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left before I want to jump into some questions at the end. So I want to show you our last programming language to talk about here. We talked about 3 really great languages. They're popular, super useful. The last language I'm going to talk about today is maybe one that's not quite so popular, not quite so useful, but it is really fun. Developers like to have fun, just like everyone else. And sometimes what they do to do that is create weird, funky languages. One of those languages is called lol code. So what you're seeing on the screen right now are some like OG memes. They're called lolcats. These are back from when I was a kid. It's just pictures of cats with funny text on it. It's kind of a funny language that they have used here. And some developers were inspired by this to create a programming language called lol code. So here's an example of the Hello World program in lol code. Let me run it real quick. Hi world. There we go. So you can see again, 2 main lines here that do what we're trying to do, but otherwise the syntax is wild and crazy. I hope you think it's fun. I certainly do. And one other fun thing, this is how you write a comment with BTW. Isn't that the strangest thing? So that's just regular text. BTW, now it's a comment. Hysterical. Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's the bulk of it. I would love to answer any of you folks' questions now if you have any.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shanna. That was amazing. As someone said in the comments, just wanted to say she's doing an excellent job on presenting the content. It's accurate, fun, and yeah.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
We have had quite a few questions. One was on, can you show lolcats? So thank you for that. We've had a lot of questions on which language to choose first, and I essentially said the one that will solve your problem, but do you have any other info on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best answer, is whatever will solve your problem. But for some people, when they're just trying to start programming for the first time, they might not have a problem in mind yet. I know that's how I was when I was first learning to program. I didn't even know necessarily what kinds of problems could be solved. And I certainly didn't know what problems I really had as a person that I wanted to solve with writing code. I would highly encourage you to kind of come up with a problem, like whatever fun thing, call it a problem, call it a challenge, whatever thing you want to do, and figure out what would suit that best. If I just had to give a totally blanket answer for what programming language to learn first, I would probably say Python. If you kind of have no expectations or no particular things in mind of what you're looking for. The reason for that is because I think it's really beginner friendly with that nice syntax, and it's just used all over the place.
Awesome. Thank you. A couple of questions on the difference between C# and C++.
Awesome.
Could you talk to me? That's basically.
I was thinking maybe there was more specifics coming.
Sorry, no, just what is the difference?
C# and C++ are actually pretty different languages. Like I said, they both are named, they're inspired based on the C programming language, but and they both are what's called object-oriented, and all of the languages we looked at today are object-oriented. Almost all modern programming languages you're going to look at are. C# is probably more used for application development. C++ is used for if you're doing development closer to the hardware, if you're doing something with IoT, that kind of stuff. Both languages are really, really fast, but C++ kind of has a better reputation for being able to make that code really fast and run on tiny devices, or maybe you don't have as much memory, that kind of stuff. Another important distinction, C# does memory management for you. C++ does not. I haven't explained at all what memory management is in this talk, so don't worry if you don't know what that means. But the biggest thing that it means practically for beginners is that C# is going to be easier to learn and get a handle on it first.
Yep. Awesome. I would agree. One person asked, do you have a favorite text editor for coding?
Oh, well, easy answer, Visual Studio Code.
Yep.
Back in college, before VS Code existed, I used Sublime. I know lots of people still use Sublime and it's popular. And I promise I don't say this because I'm just a Microsoft employee. I really don't understand why you would use any editor. I don't know why you would use Sublime anymore. Like, even if you like Vim or like a really old school editor, there's all these extensions you can have with VS Code that can basically bring in whatever functionality you like from whatever editor you're used to and make VS Code use that. Plus, you can really use really cute themes. You can install language support for a ton of different languages. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but the syntax highlighting, so the different colors in my lol code that showed up because I installed an extension for VS Code that is specifically designed to, create pretty and useful highlighting colors in your code for lol code, which is wild.
Yep. I think we're pretty much at time. There have been a couple of other questions around some other, technical questions. For example, .NET bindings for lol code, or string versus string object. I don't think we have a ton of time to explain them all today, but we did share a bunch of resources throughout this chat, this Q&A. So I encourage you all to check those out, and I'll put some of the top links for the ones that we talked about today back in that chat right now. But I wanted to thank Shanna so much for your time, and thank you everyone for engaging so much in the chat. It really makes it a lot more fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks, everyone. It was awesome. Thanks for the great questions.